Hey guys, this is Brian Palmer, your friendly neighborhood Chesapeake semester architect. I'm putting together a little video to give you guys some tips on doing audio production for your final productions for your Chesapeake semester documentaries. And this could also be applied to the projects you're doing throughout the semester as well. But a couple of things have come up, and I'm just wanting to try to address some tips and things all in one video, so that way I can make sure I kind of get the message across to everybody at once, really. So the two main areas I want to touch upon are working with background music and then working with doing voiceover. To tackle the background music first, which is probably the simpler thing to talk about, I just want to kind of keep in mind that you can find music online that's available to pay for this purpose, royalty-free music. Some of it starts really inexpensively, and even the tracks that are a little bit more pricey on places like Audio Jungle aren't more than maybe like $15 a track or something like that. Sounds like a lot more than what you might pay for, let's say, like an iTunes track for $1, which is, some song that you might know, a well-known band, let's say, for example. But the thing to keep in mind is the copyright legality here. If you're just using like any track that you might find or you might know of, you might own the track for your personal use, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you own it with the rights to be able to use it in the context of using it in your documentary. So if this was a project that was going to be used and only really sort of displayed or shown in a private audience, just in the classroom, for example, you pretty much can get away with anything. But as soon as you go and you put it up online to share it with the world, to share it with other people in our group for grading purposes, or because we want to be able to use it for just to be able to reach a broader audience, we're basically broadcasting to the world at that point, and so it becomes a much more serious issue that you can't really just use anything. You need to really be either getting permission to use the stuff that you're using, or in this case, buying stuff that's designed to be used this way. So, for example, if you go into audiojungle.net, and there's a number of places where you can get files like this, but you can just see, for example, the kinds of things that you could get. A lot. In this case, it's got an audio watermark, so that way it's not just you can't just grab it. But a lot of the times they're without any vocals, so that way it works well under your voiceover and things like that. And there's just a number of different ones you can purchase, and again you can look at them by categories and things like that. So in any case, once you're getting ready to do your voiceover, there's a few different ways you can handle voiceover. You can record it with the video camera from the actual presentation, then you can use that audio and cut away from the video and just use the audio. And that works really well if you've got good microphones and you're doing a good job during the production itself. But there's when you're going to be doing voiceover the way I'm doing for this video, it has sort of a different feel to it, and usually it works better to tie together pieces of the video. It's not always the case that you can shoot all of your footage and then by editing together bits and pieces of your video, have it really tell the complete story, especially considering that you might want to have it affect people to do certain things and act in a certain way. You want to be able to just make sure that the message that you're giving them is really crafted exactly the way you wanted it. And often the way to do that is to use voiceover in between the bits and pieces of interviews and photos and other things that you might pull together. So just really quickly, I know you've probably got other applications that you can use. I know Michael Buckley uses Cool Edit Pro, and also you can use things like GarageBand and things like that. But if you are working on a Mac or a PC, this approach that I'm going to use is a good way to show you that you can work cross-platform and use a free application. So the program I'm going to use is called Audacity, and just really quickly, if you do a search for Audacity and then basically you can download it for whatever your platform is, Mac or PC. And so once you downloaded it, install it. Basically, this is the interface here, and in this case, we're going to be using a microphone that is they're available in the MPC. You can see one of them down here. If you go into the MPC to do your voiceover, you've got the benefit of having the sound room that's in the back. And as of right now, there's not a whole lot of other equipment in there, but it is outfit to do voiceover. So if you go into that space, you can see there's a table and some chairs in there. You could bring in a laptop if you've got your own laptop, install Audacity on your own, and then you could just set up under the table and under the back here. There's network and power outlets and things like that, so you can plug in and you can work right in there. If you don't have a laptop and if you're using one of the machines in the MPC, even if you're not using this machine to do your editing, you can use the machine that's right outside the lab by running the cord under the door. It's not the best thing for now, but it does work. Just be careful that you don't actually pinch the cord, as you pass under the door. And then the computer that's set up right here outside will do the trick, and then you can see. You could just run that cable and plug in right down here. And then this will allow you the ability to have the computer outside of the space where you're doing the recording. A laptop a lot of the times is pretty quiet, but like the bigger desktop machines are a little noisier, so this lets you use this nice isolated space to do your voiceover, and then have somebody out here who's basically just sort of monitoring it. And but the best thing you could do is probably to use a laptop in the space. It gives you the ability to visually monitor while you're doing your voiceover, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do right now. So once you download Audacity, you want to make sure that if you're using one of these Samsung microphones that I just showed you, or Samsung microphones, not Samsung, the C01U is the model that we've got in the MPC. You want to make sure that you're actually using that microphone. So there's two places you need to take a look, basically. Under your system preferences on the Mac, under your sound, you want to make sure that the input driver is set to the Samson C01U. And if you don't, for example, have that one selected, you'll hear here the sound has probably just changed in the video. You can still do voiceover with the internal microphone, but the quality isn't quite as good. And a quick way to test to see if you're actually using the microphone that you're plugging in externally versus the built-in is if you're touching the computer, you'll see that the visual here picking up that noise, whereas if you tap on the microphone, in this case, we're not seeing anything, you're not hearing anything. If I turn it to the Samson mic, and now I do the same thing with the computer, you're not going to see it or hear it coming through this mic, and if I tap on the mic, you can clearly see that it's picking it up. So just a quick way to make sure you got the right source set. When you go into Audacity, there's also another place where you need to just double check, and sometimes by default, it's set to the built-in microphone. So just make sure you've got the Samson source selected here, and then when you begin to record, you'll see a visual of the waveform of what you're recording. So the thing to look out for when you're doing this recording is if you think about the space top to bottom as being sort of like 0 to 100% of your volume, the center line is sort of 0%, and the ceiling of that is sort of like the peak where you want to ever reach. You don't ever want to go above that sort of 100% volume. In this case, you can see when we hit the top, it flattens out that area, and if we were to play that back, it would be distorted. So I'm actually going to just kind of do a recording and get extra close here so you can see what I mean, how it's going to really distort that. So if I stop this and play it back, really distort that. So really distort that, you can hear it's getting distorted, it's getting clipped, as they call it. Clipping basically means as that waveform goes up and down, it doesn't smoothly fall between those top and bottom lines. It's clipping, it's hitting that ceiling and that floor, and so what ends up happening is if you watch up in the area here, if that waveform monitor, you'll see. So you can see what I mean. How it's good. You're getting that red line that's showing that you've been clipping your audio. So to be able to use, to do a voiceover, to be able to use this visually, the way you can sort of fine-tune your voice is you'll want to speak into the front of the microphone, and again, for these Samson mics, they have a little green LED that shows that it's plugged in and that it's running. It's almost like you want to speak into that green LED. You don't want to speak into the top of it, down into the microphone. You want to speak into the front of it for this kind of a microphone. And so if you're using the window as a guide, if I back off the microphone, you can see that the levels are pretty much down a little bit lower than they need to be. I could stand to be a little bit closer and to get better volume. As I move a little closer right now, I'm about 6 inches away. For the way my levels are set in my control panel, right now this looks like it's a pretty good level. And if I get even closer, you can see where now I am clipping. It just depends on where your levels are set with your computer and to where your distance needs to be. Keep in mind the way you have your microphone set with sensitivity, the closer you are to the microphone, if your levels are good, the less background noise you're going to pick up. So, for example, if you're in an environment that isn't perfectly quiet, if you're doing this, like, for example, in the MPC, or if you're using a similar setup on your own, if you don't have a really nice acoustically sort of, dampened space, or if it's not, there's some background noise, for example, the better you can get the levels, in other words, the better you can get your levels set for you to be close to the mic, the less background noise you're going to hear by comparison. Whereas if you set the levels so that way when you're way back, farther away, in order to pick up my voice clearly from this distance, I would be needing to boost up my levels. But in any case, so now that I have the levels set to where it's pretty good, and I have to be careful not to speak too loud at this effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off my mic just a little bit here, so that way I can get a little bit closer to the mic. And that looks like that's actually too low right there, so I'll bring it back up, fine-tune it a little bit somewhere in the middle. This looks pretty good here. So now my mouth is maybe about 3 or 4 inches away from the microphone with this setting the way it is. So I'm going to just stop this, and I'm going to start a new one in a second. And what I'm going to use is just from the CES website. I'm just going to read this introductory line here as what I'm going to do for voiceover. So when you're doing voiceover, keep in mind it helps to have the script written out. If you're going to be, just sort of speaking off the top of your head, even though you kind of know what the message might be, you're not going to really be able to deliver it effectively if you haven't written it out and really think about what you're saying. Again, you're really crafting this message. When you're doing an interview, it's sort of more forgivable if the people think about what they're going to say, rephrase it a little bit, because it's expected that they don't know exactly what they're going to say, speaking off the top of their head. But when you're putting together a documentary like this, and you're using these voiceover segments to tie together and to really craft the message, it's less excusable if your actual voiceover is not well thought out and is not edited well and everything. So I'm going to show you how to make that, how to record that and how to do that editing now at this point. So in any case, once I begin doing my recording here, and I'm going to begin recording this sentence here. So what I'll do is I'll read through it, and if I don't feel like I did a good job, that's the beauty of doing it digitally, is I can go back and I can either reread just a segment, or I can reread the whole section, and depending on what it is or how it flows, and I'll make my decision based on that. So I'll start off here with this sentence. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select group of students in the I'm speaking to you when I make a mistake, but as soon as I make a mistake, you don't have to worry about it. You can just stop and pick up that word where you left off, and I'll show you how to edit that later. So we'll start over again. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select group of students in the interdisciplinary study of North America's largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay. So that wasn't bad, but let me just sort of do it again so that way you can see where if I was to make more mistakes, how you might edit that. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select group of students will engage a select group of students in the interdisciplinary study of North America's largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay. So I just hit the space bar to stop this here, and I kind of deliberately made a few more mistakes, and that actually will make it a little bit harder to edit than if I hadn't made quite as many mistakes, I guess, but it'll help illustrate the point of what we could do it now. So you can use this bottom slaughter area here to go back and to scrub through your audio. You can pull this down if you wanted to be able to sort of visually see it a little bit better here, but at any point you can click in here and then hit the space bar to play. I'll read through it, and if I don't feel like I did a good job, or I can reread the whole section, and depending on what it is or how it flowed. So I just move to the right a little bit here. I think this is probably where I started. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select group of students in the So I'm just going to probably throw out that whole first section there, and where I picked up again, which looks like after this pause might be it. You don't have to worry about it. You can just. Or maybe it's after this bigger pause here. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select. So that wasn't bad. Here we go. Each fall, the Chesapeake. So this is where the take really begins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click here and drag to the left, and I've got all this stuff, which I don't care about. And this might be pretty straightforward for a lot of you guys how to do this editing, but I just want to make sure that I do cover all the bases here. So I've got all that selected that I don't want. I'm just going to hit the delete key, and now it begins right at the beginning of that section. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select group of students in the interdisciplinary study of North America's largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay. So let's say that Chesapeake Bay that wasn't a good take, and I wanted to use one that I found later. So what I can do is I know right here at this 7-second mark is where that's going to begin, that I want to find the piece to replace it. So I can go and find other takes where it sounds better. Make more mistakes how you might edit that. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage of North America's largest estuary, North America's largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay. So maybe I like the way that tone was at the end, where I sort of raised my tone a little bit and changed my voice. So what I'll do is I'll just take this whole section, and this is a bigger sort of swath of editing than you might typically do in one setting, because you're not typically cutting out as many phrases at once. Usually you're fine-tuning it. What I find, honestly, is that when I'm doing voiceover recording, usually I know when I'm recording what's good and what's bad. So, for example, if I'm recording it and I go through a section and it doesn't quite sound right, I'll just rephrase that one section, and then, so I can mute my phone here. Let's let that ring. So sometimes you're not able to, so if you know what you're when you're voicing it over, you'll know that you sort of made a mistake, and you'll just rephrase that one section, repeat that one section, or whatever it might be. And so what you'll end up doing is you'll know that the last take is the take that you like. In other words, you'll know that, for example, that last take is the one that you like. So if you did 5 takes, you wouldn't necessarily think that the 4th take is your best take. You have the option to use the 4th take, and that's definitely the possibility. And if you're working in a group, you might collectively think that a different take is better. But if I'm doing it by myself, usually when I'm listening to it, while I'm talking about it, I'll know that I'll stop when I have one that I like. So visually, it's easy to know that the last time I said a phrase, that's probably the one that I liked. And then I'll just go in and I'll delete out all the versions before that. And it doesn't have to be one continuous phrase. It could just be just that bit, that piece of it. So that's probably a little bit more long-winded than it needed to be. But when you get done, you're basically pulling together the pieces that you wanted. And so in the end, you'll have this. Each fall, the Chesapeake semester will engage a select group of students in the interdisciplinary study of North America's largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay. And maybe that pause is a little bit long in here. So again, you can fine-tune it further by cutting out that pause. Largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay. And also there's a little bit of a breath here. You can delete out things like that as well. So that's that line completed. And at this point, I can export it. And I could save it as a WAV file, which you can then integrate it into your in your files. If you're using, again, iMovie to do it, you would import it into iTunes, and then you'd be able to access it from in your iMovie window over here. But in any case, one more thing I wanted to show you. This actually is a decent level recording. In fact, you can see I just barely peaked out here with the very tip of that waveform, which is kind of actually the most you want to get. That's not bad. But let's say, for example, this was all that I had. Let me just go ahead and I'm just going to delete most of it but this one piece, for example. So now, because I still have, about from the center line out about 1/3 of the space available, I've got more volume that I could pull out of this clip. Select group of students in the interdisciplinary study of North America's largest estuary. So you're better off trying to normalize your clips to try to get them all at a good level at this stage in the game. Your best bet is to do it when you're actually voicing it. If you recorded it all very low, let's say, for example, like just the level of this bit here, that would just really be too low. And if you boosted that up, you're more likely to pick up background noise or like just hiss and things like that. But if you have pretty good levels like this, then it's best to try to bring them all into your editing application with the levels all ideally set so that way they just about peak but not quite peak at the top. So that way your levels are all maxed out and consistent, basically, consistently good and loud. It's easier to drop stuff later to make it less loud than to have to boost it all later in your video editing software, because you have a little bit less control there. So what you can do is, with this whole clip selected, you can go up to Effect and Normalize, And then you basically say you want to basically normalize this, which is going to take these peaks and make everything increase in volume until the peak areas max out at at the ceiling. And in this case, you can put it at 0 dB, which is basically maxing out right at that ceiling, or a minor drop, which is -1 dB, which will drop it just a little bit less than. So it's looking at this peak right here, or at some point is basically whatever the loudest point is where it's maxing that one point out. So this basically just boosted the audio just a little bit. Again, it's just the whole point here is to get your audio levels as good as you can get them before you bring them into your editing application. So that's all I'm going to really say about doing the voiceover for now. I think that might be a little bit more than you need. The last thing I want to talk about is just unrelated, but another little thing that I've noticed has come up. When you're exporting your video in your iMovie projects and you're sharing them, I'm not sure if some of you are doing this more a little bit differently. I noticed one group shared it to an iDVD, and then I extracted it off that. If you share it as a DVD file, the only problem with that is that the DVD by default is going to be standard definition. It's going to be like a sixth of the resolution that you shot it at with those HD cameras. So even if it's done really well, it sort of looks a little bit lower quality when you compare it side by side with some of the other ones that people are doing, because you're all using the same equipment, but in your case, your resolution is going to be dropped down. Especially if you have things like titles and things like that, where you have to have that finer detail on the screen, it's going to be a little bit harder to read. So just make sure that you go down to Export Movie, and then make sure you have this last one checked off. It should be HD 1080p. If that's not available for some reason, that means that you probably did something wrong. And if you're just finding this out at this stage in the game, it's going to be hard to fix it without going back and then re-editing it. So make sure when you're importing the footage that you import it full resolution. Don't import it, with a scaled down resolution. But when you're ready to save it, again, just go ahead and type in your name, check the HD 1080p video option, hit export, and then it's going to export it at that highest resolution. And what that'll do is it'll give you the option, if later you wanted to put it on a DVD, you can always downsample it. But considering the fact that we've in the past been uploading these to YouTube and sharing these with the different staff and faculty who are involved in going over it for either the content or from a mechanical standpoint, if everything is working well or however it may be, it gives the best viewing capabilities from what you've shot. And why not do that, right? Because if you've gone to the trouble to shoot it all in high definition, you might as well present it in high definition. This is also crucial for your final projects, because your final projects are being shown before your live audience, projected in the CAC forum up on the computer there. And because that computer is going to be playing back in high definition, it makes the most sense to be able to show them at the highest quality. If you take a standard definition video that you've exported and play it back on that 100-inch projection screen, it's going to look muddy and not real clean. So just keep that in mind. If you guys have any questions, definitely contact me. Hopefully this is going to answer some of the questions you might have. But deadlines are coming up quickly, so let me know sooner than later if you have questions, and we'll try to help you out. Thanks a lot, and take care.